Imagine living here. This place is High by Vicky Cobb, illustrated by Barbara Lavallee. When you fly into La Paz, Bolivia, you land at El Alto, the highest airport in the world. El Alto are Spanish words meaning the high one. The nearby snow-covered peaks of the Andes form a breathtaking skyline, but the view is not the only thing that takes your breath away. This high up, almost 2.5 miles above the sea, the air is thin, there is less oxygen, and you will feel the first symptoms of mountain sickness, oxygen starvation. Within 5 minutes after leaving your airplane, your heart beats faster, you breathe more quickly, and a short staircase can leave you gasping. Within 3 hours, you may have a pounding headache and feel sleepy. Some people get very sick and need to breathe pure oxygen to help them adjust to the thin air. Newcomers are advised to eat very little at the first day, drink special tea, and take it very easy for several days.
There is a characteristic that most of the cities and towns in Colombia have in common. They are built around churches. Cathedrals are located in the city centers. Take a look to these cities' downtowns. Have you ever realized about it? If so, have you wondered why cities are built like this? In order to understand it, we need to go back in history. When Europeans arrived to America with their conquering interest, they found native population that reacted in different ways. Some of them were friendly, but most of them were not. The conquering process took some years and it left disastrous casualties for the native population. Most of the native people were killed. Native current studies from the Berkeley University states there was a mortality of between 90 and 120 millions. This episode of history is often referred as the American Holocaust. After a century of European rule, in America only survived an estimated of 3% native population that in colonizers' mind had to be transformed into civilized human beings. Natives had their own beliefs, which included a rich amount of gods and goddesses. For instance, there is the Muiscas religion. Muiscas inhabited some of the territory nowadays known as Colombia. Muiscas had various deities such as Chiminegagua, who made the light in the earth, Chia, goddess of the moon, and Sue, god of the sun, among others. All the native communities had their own beliefs, and there were hundreds of them. Europeans needed a successful way to control native people. In order to do it, they needed to control their minds. Colonizers started to demolish all the temples and sacred places natives had. Upon those places, they built Christian churches. European people built Christian churches in government houses in representation of religion and government. Around it, there was a space for the colonizers, and the peripheries were left for the natives. This distribution meant to show the importance that from the Europeans' point of view, each social element had. Other important places chosen by the Europeans to build the Christian churches were the high ones. This is the reason why in Bogota, the Monserrate and Guadalupe churches are built in the highest places of the city. This city's division made by the conquerors was intended to control and transform native people into a European way of thinking, forcing natives to accept their subjugated position and making them easy to handle. Native people, with the pass of the time, were forced to adopt the Europeans' beliefs and accept the class division. Native beliefs were snatched from them, ending up in oblivion. This city's class division remains until nowadays. This is why city's distribution is centralized. The center is the place in which the power remains, government and religion. City's periphery is left for the oppressed and forgotten.
A little more than half the people of the Altiplano are native Aymara and Quechua Indians. Their skin is dark, which protects them from the sun's strong rays. Their barrel-shaped chests have larger lungs than people who live at the sea level. Larger lungs can absorb more oxygen from the thin air. The Indians have about a quart more blood and many more red blood cells than lowlanders. Red blood cells carry oxygen, so Indian blood carries more oxygen than lowlanders. Their arms and legs are shorter, so blood can travel more quickly around the body. They have extra blood vessels in their hands and feet so they stay warm, even if they are barefoot when it's freezing cold at night. Their hearts are larger and they pump more blood with each beat than smaller hearts. They don't notice that the air is thin. In this part, we see natives shown from a colonial point of view as a particular race. But what is race? It is a constructed idea that originated in the colonial times as a way to classify the population of the world. But of course, these populations were supposed to be weaker because they were different from Europeans. In the book, the native Aymara and Quechua from Bolivia are pictured as a race with specific biological conditions different from the other humans. But wait a minute. Quechua is not a community per se. The author might be a little bit wrong here, because Quechua is the language family that many Andean tribes use to communicate. So maybe she meant Incas? However, it is not about race. It's about genetics. How? Well, if we think about Darwin, yes, Darwin, the guy who thought about the evolution of species, he mentioned something called the survival theory, that points that species genetically change to adapt to the conditions of the environment. So, with this in mind, aren't the Aymara and Inca species that developed special characteristics to survive the rough conditions of the Bolivian highlands? And so, their larger lungs, their quantity of blood, the shortness of their arms and legs, their extra blood vessels, and their larger hearts are nothing more than genetical features that evolved for adaptation. But here goes the question. Are the Aymara and Inca the only humans living in Bolivia who needed to change in order to adapt? Now, let's think about this. Their skin is dark, which protects them from the sun's strong rays. Their skin is dark? Is that concept of skin color familiar to you? Well, color is a mental construct too. It was imposed by the dominant Europeans that opened a road to control all the people they encountered navigating the oceans. From Africa to America, they used color to refer to the black Africans, giving them the identity of dominated people. Again, to differentiate themselves from the ones that did not look like them. So, Africans were black, but also slaves, better to be called slaved, as it wasn't their choice. The Native Americans were a weak race, but also savages without reason. And Europeans were white, but also the conquistadors, the dominant ones. Then the question that pops up is, do you think that some humans are superior to others because of color or race?
Typical music and dances are two of the most representative elements within the culture of a country or region. The dances and music from Bolivia are the result of a cultural syncretism of native indigenous and Spanish traditions, customs, and beliefs. In other words, traditions of the Andes were involved from a series of pre-Inca, Inca, Spanish, Amazonian, and even African influences. Reason why it's possible to see in this image a musical group whose instruments are not only composed by zampoñas and quenas, which are pre-Hispanic instruments made of wood typical in the music from the Andes, but also wind instruments from other countries such as the trumpet and the French horn that belong to the European music and the drums that comes from African tradition. Let's remember too that before the colonization period, dance was the essence of rituals. People did it in honor of natural deities. In fact, many communities of native indigenous, as Muiscas, considered that when dancing, with their feet hitting the ground, they were breathing the earth.